really, really, make the right decision or be very close to it.
These are lessons I need to do to achieve that dream, especially when my parents who love me, they really like me to do something else. How did you kind of get around that? Hello, and welcome to the Leadership Blueprint. Today, we're joined by a fantastic guest. As an ex-rugby professional, an Olympian, and now into a business sports innovator, I think this guest is going to bring something really special to the episode today. I met Andrew at the Rugby Sevens when JOH Partners was sponsoring Riyadh Rugby. Andrew's come over. He's done a fantastic thing for Riyadh Rugby, and we got talking. And I was really interested in his journey, his background, and we're going to get into some of those things today, including, his parents' academia, the journey that he's gone through, and some of the sports innovation that he's bringing to the industry itself. And so I think today's going to be a really good one. There's a lot of interesting transition that this guy's gone through, and I think it's going to be one that everyone's going to enjoy listening to. So, Andrew, once again, thanks so much for joining us today. And I just think it'd be great to give people, in your own words, a quick little introduction, and then we'll jump into some of these questions and go from there. But once again, thanks so much for joining us, and over to you, mate.
Thank you, Oliver. First of all, I was born in the US to Fijian parents. Ethnicity-wise, I am Fijian. Grew up in Fiji, went to college in Japan, and then moved to the US after I graduated, and then was a professional rugby player for over a decade, globetrotting and playing around the world.
No, good stuff. And I thought it was something that was quite interesting when we were speaking sort of before the episode and things. You were mentioning to me kind of your parents are from academia, and you said it's one of those things where kind of at the start of the career there was a real kind of a love from them, but a bit of resistance for, should you be going into sport, stay with academia? And there was something that you said there, I think even from an early age, the mindset that you had to be in to commit to your dream and your passion and how you executed on that. And I think even from that early age, it'd just be a really interesting one to say, do you feel it's something within the DNA or something within those around you? Or how did right from the start, these are lessons I need to do to achieve that dream, especially when my parents who love me, they really like me to do something else. How did you kind of get around that?
Yeah, I think, growing up in a household that was straight academia, both my parents were teachers by profession. Especially trying to change something that it's always been that way. Change takes some time, and obviously trying to convince them was probably one of the hardest things growing up. And then later on, it was just my mom, because my dad passed away when I was pretty young, but I guess my mom still held on to those teachings of what my dad would have done. So they were very resistant at the beginning, but I think I was very determined from a very young age to kind of change that narrative.
Yeah. And so you're getting into sport at a young age, when did you realize this isn't just something I'm passionate about? This is something which I could really go to the next level. Was it the people around you? Was it a mindset change? What was that sort of flicking of a switch when you said, I can really push on to that next level from an elite sort of athlete perspective?
Yeah, I think for the most part, you start to really enjoy the love of the sport with your friends, and then it gets to a point where you kind of like realize, especially when you start getting older into your teens, that you actually like really enjoy playing with your friends. And then I think sort of that towards the end of high school and going into college is where you kind of have to start making serious decisions on where you want your life to go. So I think that was kind of the turning point for myself.
Yeah. Okay. And you had a fantastic playing career, but a lot of people really struggle afterwards. You since completing your sort of playing career, you've gone on and done your MBA. You're involved in a performance business, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. How did you kind of how did you get yourself in the right mindset to say, I need to be prepared for what's coming next, and taking some of those steps so that you weren't caught out, which we do see a lot of sports professionals that do get caught out.
Mhm.
They forget what the next step is. What were some of those plannings, lessons? Was it teachings of others around you? Was it all self motivation? Was it a combination of everything? How did you kind of get yourself ready for that next step?
I think the main thing was, I think in hindsight, looking back, I was very young at the time. Um, my mom sort of like guided me, and I think through that wisdom of going through academia first was
Mm,
always her mindset. So I think for me now, looking back, I'm kind of glad that I front loaded a lot of the transition work.
yeah.
Meaning, I finished school and then went into professional rugby straight away. And I think that kind of helped me transition seamlessly from being a professional athlete to life after rugby. So I guess a lot of athletes struggle with the transition is because they don't have that framework in place or any sort of framework to kind of assist them going through that.
Mm,
Now it's more, you'll see a lot of sporting organizations pay a lot of attention to the transition phase of an athlete's career because they're realizing it's one of the biggest areas that needs a lot of, I guess, innovation and um, just, I guess, new ways of approaching it.
yeah. And when you talk about that framework, is is the framework very much a like a regimented set of steps? Is it a you know putting together a framework on education? Is it putting together a framework on mindset change? Is it a framework on a change in lifestyle because you're going from that team setup into a business setup, and that, yes, there's business culture, but it is different? Or is it a combination of all these things? And ultimately, is that kind of what's got you focused on your sort of coachy performance partners, because that is helping very much athletes with transition. That is, giving them that voice in partnership. And how do you build that framework? I think is the core of this. And what are the key elements? Is it very individual and personalized? Is there a kind of one size fits all with a few bits bolted on top? How does that kind of work for you guys?
I think the main thing, and different, I guess, frameworks for different people will look very different.
Mm,
Um, and I think that it really depends on how the person kind of views themselves in the future or, future endeavors of future, um, I guess, ambition is the right word to use. And it will look very different. Like my journey will look very different to one of my teammates' journey or to your journey if you were
mm,
playing professional, um, playing professional sport or playing professional rugby. Um, but I guess it really comes down to the individual and what kind of area they want to kind of tailor their future to be,
yeah.
and setting those frameworks. I think working towards it little by little, I think is a good way of going about it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And did did some of this mindset and ideas, did that really help with your roles that you're playing within some of the US Paralympic committees and some of the other setups that you're involved with? Were you able to bring certain frameworks into those, or was it they wanted you to almost be that sort of ambassador for them to move things forward? How did that experience really play a benefit for these setups?
Yeah, I think joining the Olympic movement for about a year now,
Mm,
I kind of knew that I wanted to go back into sports. So I
mm,
worked for a brokerage firm based out of Seattle, Washington. And then later transitioned towards the end of last year to um, the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee. And I think most of the work that I kind of see on that side, could be very beneficial for them in terms of, having lived experience through a lot of that transition phase of a lot of these athletes. And we are really investing heavily in that sort of area. Um,
Mm.
and kind of realizing that it's one of the big ways to go.
Okay. And you've played a big part, and you're part of a business that's got some focus on um, wellness data. So athletes getting more data to help them perform. How have you seen that sort of shift? Because I'm sure when you sort of started the career, data science was less well known, and the world is changing. And I think bringing that data into a work environment, bringing that data into a sport environment is really key for where everything is changing today. How did you kind of bring that idea to the masses? Because I think it's a great thing that's been needed, and you've been able to work in and sort of start to bridge that gap. But was there resistance at the start? Did people kind of say, "Do you know what, I've always done it a certain way, I don't need those data points," or was there a big buy-in straight away, and there was just a gap in the market for getting that out to more people? What was the sort of problem you were trying to help and solve within that?
I guess just making more informed decisions. And I think that's the
Mm,
great thing about data is just how accurate it is, especially when you have a lot of these datas. You know, you can really, really, make the right decision or be very close to it,
yeah,
which I think is very important, especially when you run an organization, when you're trying to make a decision that really impacts your future. And I think that's the beauty about it. And a lot of what we do now is based around data. I think everything's data now. So
yeah.
um, I think whoever has that information, I guess has power. Yeah,
Yeah, maybe too much power, but
exactly. Yeah.
big brother is watching you.
Uh-huh.
In terms of the analytics and the transformation, at what point have you seen a real kind of a change in mindset? And by that I mean making those decisions based off of a real. I'm going to go back to this question, actually. Sorry. I'm stumbling over my own question. It's the first time I've ever done this, mate. I'm just going to go back to the end of your bit. And sorry, Eugene, you're just going to have to cut this bit for me. I had the idea and I lost it, and I was trying to literally make up my question on the spot here. Wait on. This was it, right? No, absolutely. And what I'm interested in is obviously over time as data has become more prevalent and people have that data to hand. Looking back on the career, are there times when you think, do you know what, a decision that was made, a lesson that we thought was the right way to do something, actually is now completely wrong? Do you have some of those sort of ideas? Looking back, we'd now do things really differently, or is it just the world has moved on? And so there's an evolution. I'm always kind of keen now that sort of reflection piece of we'd have actually done that really differently now, and this could be the outcome. Do you have a couple of examples like that? Is there anything sort of on reflection that the lessons have changed over time?
Yeah, I guess over time, when I was starting out as a professional athlete,
Mm,
I think data wasn't so much used, and then I've seen the transformation of how data has been used within the professional sporting environment. And I kind of wish that I had that earlier, had the accessibility to a lot of these tools, because I think I would have been a very, very different player and earlier on. And I
mm,
also get the time, it was also a going through a transition phase, and now Data is in all aspects of rugby, of sports, and it is at the forefront of um, a lot of transformation or a lot of key trends in the sporting world. We'll see a lot of digital and data transformation moving forward in 2025. So I think that's something that, yeah, in hindsight, looking back, from when coaches used to just go off watching somebody, you can pair it with data now and
Yeah.
see, and putting those things together. Um, you know, I think one of the examples would be, it's a fine line between using the data and then obviously having that feel as, a professional athlete or a coach monitoring somebody that, or somebody's data and then seeing versus them performing on the field. So it is a fine line, but
Yeah.
at the same time, data, we always had this saying, the eye in the sky never lies. When I had this coach, Mike Friday, and he'd always say that because we'd always wear these GPS devices. And, if we didn't run enough or we weren't working hard enough, you'll get caught out at the end because, it's basically your meters or the intensity or the velocity at which you're performing.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, it goes both ways. And yeah, definitely, I guess the more tools you have um, at your disposal, I think the better, especially from a performance side.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. We've seen from a performance standpoint of health and fitness, absolutely.
Mhm,
From a mental standpoint, um, looking back on your career, as you mentioned, you had kind of, on the family side, very supportive, sorry, very loving, but
mhm,
maybe not as supportive at the start. Then you obviously mentioned your father passing away and things. How have you kind of dealt with some of those adversities through the career from a sort of a mental health standpoint? Because you know, I think that's been the thing that's been most stand out for me when we've been speaking is you've achieved a hell of a lot, but at the same time, it hasn't been a straightforward, easy journey. And I think that's something which most impressed me kind of about yourself is we always look at the performance on the pitch, but it's the mental
mhm.
side of things that helps you perform that I think sometimes isn't talked about enough. So, what are some of those key lessons that you've kind of been able to kind of put in place to get over some of that adversity? Whether that's on a personal standpoint, whether that's a disappointment after a game. How have you kind of built that resilience over your life to sort of deal with some of these situations?
I guess for me personally, and I've always said this to a couple of um, youngsters that I coach, is the day that you think you've arrived, I think is the day that your professional career will end as a professional athlete because it continues to evolve. You have to constantly keep getting better, keep improving. I know it's very cliche to say, but that's something that I've kind of realized is a lot of the players or the athletes that I've come across that that are comfortable where they're at and not pushing those boundaries usually don't last very long in this sort of business because it you know players right behind you coming up that are faster, younger, stronger. So you
Mm.
always have to like stay ahead of the game in terms of using your experience more so much as you get older as well and as you are competing at the highest level. I think especially with the transition phase or with athletes trying to navigate where they want to go in their career. And I've had, a couple of sit down chats with a lot of emerging young professional athletes that, want to go to the Olympics or want to go to the World Cup or want
Mm.
to play in a professional league in the UK or in Europe or in Super Rugby down, in the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm.
Um, you know, being able to see your development from the lens of, I guess, a coach and I guess the timeline of where you want to go and giving yourself enough time for you to develop into those timelines, I guess, and being very proactive doing it, I think
Yeah.
helps a lot in hitting the goals that you've set out. When I was pretty young, I always knew I wanted to become a professional athlete, and I told myself the cutoff date for me to be a full international was before the age of 25. Um,
Gee.
and I had to like really put a lot of pressure on myself to obviously try and achieve that. I had
Mm.
played rugby representing Fiji at age group levels, U19s, U21s, and I also captained them. So in my head, my transition, like my natural thought was, I'm going to play for Fiji. Um, until it came to like the 2011 World Cup, and I get cut from like the last 35. Um, but those are the speed bumps. The
Yeah.
road will never be straight, and that's where I think that real, um, I guess, ways to not let that hinder you and
Mm.
take you off that path of where you really want to go. I was devastated at like 21.
Yeah.
I thought it was the end of the world because I had to like set that goal, and I was like really the conviction of me going to become an international. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, I was going to become an international. It's just the I guess the emblem on the jersey would just would um would pick itself, I guess.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah.
because you played with some like really talented people going up through your school ages, and like you said, it was kind of you played alongside these great players. You've been captain. You'd set your
Mhm.
goals, and then you had the disappointment. How did you, from a mental standpoint, pick yourself up? How did you not let it become all consuming? How did you not just say, do you know what? I am going to completely quit on this journey. I'm going to, go do what my mom wants and, all this other stuff. How did you kind of keep fast to that sort of core, no, this is what I want to do and this is just a road bump? Because I think whether it's business, whether it's sport, whether it's personal life, dealing with adversity is a real that's when you grow. You don't grow when things are going well. So how did you kind of deal with that situation?
Yeah, I think it, especially when you have a setback like that, and how you think of a situation in your head is very different to how the situation plays out.
Hmm.
And I guess that's the area where a lot of athletes that actually make it or actually achieve those goals. I'd always say you've got to be a little bit crazy to do this business as well, because it does, like, you have to be a bit crazy to do this because the amount of times it plays on your emotions, and you just being able to like not focus on something that just happened, or something that would have a big hindrance in the way you kind of want to see, I guess, your journey on the straight and narrow. So um, I think that's, yeah, I was kind of very, very um, glad that I was a bit crazy at the time as well. And you're young, so you have nothing to lose. I think that nothing to lose mentality also helps, I think, if it's honed the right way. Um,
Yeah,
and
and
yeah, just doing that.
so on the flip side, as you get further in the career, you get older and you have something to lose.
Hmm.
How do you still perform? Because you always see that, the young star comes on the scene and everyone's like, oh, he's
Hmm.
playing with such freedom. Look at him go. And then, 5 years later, it's like, oh, the weight of the world's on his shoulders. Oh, how can he deal with this? How did you, how were you able to deal with some of that? And it leads very much into another question. So I'm going to kind of do the two together. what's been the biggest misconception you've seen coming out of professional sport now? You're still involved with it, but since your playing career has come to an end, what's been the biggest misconception you found from the public's view? You know, so there's a combination here. Like, I think those two together, kind of the misconception and dealing with the pressure. How do you sort of make peace with these two things that are probably at the opposite end of the spectrum, to be fair?
Yeah, I think I guess, when athletes kind of retire when they finish, having trying to bridge that gap to doing something else,
Mm,
or whether it be like in the professional world, in corporate world, in business or whatnot, I think they do have the tools. A lot of it is just making them understand the transferable skills and how to really kind of use that um, moving forward. I've always told my friend, like, if you're able to deal with 30 people with different
mm,
personalities and get them on the same page, all pushing in the same direction, that should give you enough confidence for you to, pretty much tackle um, or navigate life and ups and downs, no matter what kind of situation you're in.
yeah,
Because, dealing with people is very hard, and especially on teams that I've been a part of, I've been in teams where the they're very, very different culturally.
mm, mm,
So, I've been on the Fijian team, I've been on an all Japanese team, and I've been on all US team, I've been on an all predominantly British, like UK
yeah,
team. So you kind of, I think it is very universal. The components are still very much the same teamwork. It's just, I guess, how they kind of do things in their manner. But I think it's very universal in that way.
okay, no, that makes sense. And so obviously since the playing career, you've gone on, you've done the MBA, you're putting that to use in some of these ventures that we're sort of been speaking about. What was, something we spoke about sort of offline was as you were going through that MBA and things, you were saying to us there were people on the course that were from very different backgrounds and had very different experiences, and at times you were sort of saying, am I doing the right thing sitting alongside these guys? It's not
Mhm.
imposter syndrome, but am I getting the right things out of this? Am I, how did you kind of bridge that gap of, do you know what, this is the right thing for me. This does fill in, I absolutely am, it's the right thing to be doing. But again, it's that voice in your head, and you've gone from the voice in the head on the pitch. You've learned how to deal with that. Now you're off the pitch and that voice in the head's kind of back, but for different reasons. How did you kind of bridge that and take that, lessons from on the pitch and then transfer them, but in a completely different situation?
Yeah, I think for me, it was I think at the end of the career, yes, I missed playing professional sport, but at the
Mm,
same time, it was very refreshing to be in a totally new environment, or going back to an environment that I kind of knew, but
mm,
it really was refreshing being reminded, of the joys of learning
yeah,
and, absorbing a lot of stuff from a lot of, my classmates that had vast experience in the industries or in the areas that I was aspiring to get to.
yeah,
So I've always been one that would always try a situation first. I always try to learn from that experience. So um, it felt very intimidating at first because obviously I'd been out of um, the world of academia and trying to, I guess, pick up the scraps of the athlete journey and how to make that translate
mm,
into something that would help me later on down the line. But yeah, I think for the most part, um, I think just being very open-minded and being able to take what each one had to offer, each one had to share, I think really helped me. And, to some extent, I still really, really carry um, a lot of the lessons that have been taught to me by them.
Yeah.
Um, and they do understand that I've come back from, I've just come out of a professional athlete, um, I guess, profession. And
Mm.
so a lot of the things they teach me, I kind of teach them, the leadership components, the resiliency,
Yeah.
um, and also try to really change their perspective on how they kind of lead their different organizations.
Yeah.
Now, how to, uh, think very unconventionally in terms of leadership, and how, it's not a one size fits all kind of mold that you have to fit into. And I think that's the key to being a very, very good leader, and someone that can, I guess, transcend, different spaces and industries.
No, 100%. And I think the thing you've not mentioned yet, probably because you're quite modest at times, but again, you mentioned to me on our call the other day, is the amount of different people that you've met along the way, the amount of different conversations you've been in, the networking. And I mean, you've always embraced that. You've always said, what can I learn? Who can I speak to? But on a more sort of light-hearted note, what's one of the most strange introductions you've had that's led to something you didn't expect? And what I'm trying to get at here is to sort of point out to people, you never know where someone's going to take you. Um, do you have one or two examples of that? Like, got introduced to this guy, didn't really thought, what the heck's going on here? And it's just led to something fantastic further down the line, whatever that might be. Because you've met some, you've met prime ministers and different individuals and business guys, and you get introduced to anyone and everyone kind of through the sport of rugby, because it's such a such a great networking and just environment. But what have been those unexpected gems that have just led to something really cool? I'm just always intrigued to see those kind of networking stories come to fruition, really.
Yeah, I guess the most recent one was, um, I had been invited to go to Pakistan,
Mm.
with one of my classmates, and he was, um, runs a business out of Pakistan, and was telling me, oh, we have some of the alumni that are in the city of Islamabad and all these places, and I guess, um, when I said being very open-minded, I kind of jumped on the opportunity, not knowing how the trip would end up. Um, but I guess it turned out to be probably one of the most eye-opening sort of, yeah, thrilling journeys that I've ever been on. Arrived into Pakistan, into Islamabad. He was showing me around. It was me and a couple of the classmates. And
Mhm.
then he comes back the next day and is like, yeah, I've also requested for us to have an audience with the president. And I was just thinking like, oh, it must be like a president for the alumni. And then he goes, no, we're going to the Parliament House to meet the president of Pakistan. So yeah, just luckily enough, I had a suit with me, and yeah, get in a suit, and then meet the president of Pakistan, and got to like really ask him, you know, some questions on where they see themselves moving towards as a nation. What are the big industries that are, um, that could be very useful to Pakistan in terms of, trade with the outside world. It was really, really, um, yeah, an eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah.
Almost felt like I was a diplomat, going overseas. But um, yeah, he was very knowledgeable, and
Mm.
being educated in the US and being a doctor as well. So I think that really, really, um, was one that was like a real curveball to me, going on a trip, and then next thing you know, I'm at the president's house meeting the president, and then the following day we're on the front page of the Pakistan like newspaper. So um, yeah, so that was
That's
that
a
was
good one.
one
That's a good one. Yeah.
that's that was uh, one very, very, I think the most recent one. And then before that, I guess, after the 2016 Rio Olympics,
Mm.
the US Olympic squad usually gets invited to Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
and is hosted by the president. And at the time, it was President Obama, Barack Obama. And I'd
Yeah.
never been to Washington, D.C., and I was telling um, my sister and my cousins, like the first time I fly into Washington, D.C., I touch down and I go straight to the White House to meet the president. I was like, I've got the, that should be
It's
one
pretty cool.
for the
Yeah.
books right there. So um,
That's pretty cool.
I've
Yeah.
been so fortunate um, to meet a lot of amazing people.
Mm.
Not just only presidents, but just a lot of um, very inspiring people around myself,
Yeah.
both as athletes, in the world of academia, or just people, running their own businesses, because you can always take something from somebody's lived experience, I think. Um, and I always had that mindset, move like wherever I went. So
Mm.
I think, I guess, and it's always worked out for me. So I guess that's must be doing something right that on that side, on that front.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, mate. Yeah, that's pretty cool, I must say. So you know, you mentioned there about trends, about the future. What do you see then as the biggest kind of trends within um, you know, the trends that are shaping basically the future of sport and the sports management side? We've slightly touched on data, we've slightly touched on wellness. Are there particular things? Maybe those are the two biggest things you see as change. Are there specific things within that you see happening? Is there something else? What do you feel is going to be the big sort of over the next 5 years? These two, three areas are really going to change the way people think about sport and sports management from that side.
Yeah, I think the I guess the top three that I've kind of um, thought of and mentioned, one earlier, which was um, the digital transformation, which is, the streamings and how sport is being delivered. I think is one of the huge
Mm,
ones, um, especially looking towards um, LA 28 and even further
yeah,
beyond that. There's a lot of, I guess, big events that are coming to the US. So next year we have the FIFA World Cup, which is going to be hosted by North America, Mexico, Canada,
yeah,
and the US, and then followed by the Olympics in LA 28.
mm,
And then after that, we have the Rugby World Cup coming to the US as well. So both the men's and the women's, 31
crazy.
and then 33. And then
Wow,
after that, to just top that all off, we have the Winter Olympics as well, I think in 34. So there's a
not
lot of,
bad.
yeah. So I think there's a lot of moving parts, and you can see it in, there's a big transformation within, um, this sport market landscape and
Mm,
how we are kind of gearing towards that, just to have all those kind of tournaments, competitions aligned towards, on our way to LA 28, on our way to 31. The second big trend, obviously, is the fan engagement component and
yeah,
how, things have to be turned towards the experience of the fans, basically, whether that be on the digital side or whether that be in person. And I
mm,
think a lot of the lessons of, American professional sport and how it's been being delivered. I usually go to a lot of like Major League Baseball games.
mm,
Obviously I don't really support a team, but I just love to see how they deliver the game day experience. It's something like absolutely thrilling. The fans are always involved. There's a competition bat or when the batting changes over, when a batsman walks out, they play a song that he selected for him to
Yeah.
walk out to. So, I always watch that and kind of see what are the areas where we can bring across to a sport like rugby or to other sports, and
Yeah.
how to make that experience, really enhance that experience for the fans. I guess the third one would be obviously big space, and I know you probably are familiar and have been seeing it in Riyadh, is um, esports and gaming. There's
Yeah.
a lot of talk of how if esports should be in the Olympics and whatnot. There's a lot of debate. I was reading an article by somebody that posted something on LinkedIn yesterday,
Mm.
um, on how they see, the esports kind of ecosystem evolving. And yeah, I'm kind of leading. The reason why I know this space very well is because I'm writing the report, the sports trends report for
Oh,
2025. So I kind of really understand it, and I just
that's
submitted it
cool.
yesterday. So a lot of it is public information. You can find it on the
Mm.
web, but then looking towards, I guess, the big sporting consulting firms
Yep.
and seeing which areas they are focusing on. And that's how I kind of, pull together the assumption of what's going to be trending in 2025.
Yeah.
And there's, I guess, it all ties back to being that proactive and how
Hmm.
sporting organizations or people prepare for what the future is going to look like. Um, and, I'd really love to, after learning a lot from the current organization I'm with. I think my journey is I really envision myself going to a organization that's still developing and kind of
Hmm.
help them find their way through or help in the development of their organization, whether that be in rugby, whether that be in a different sport. Um, it would be very challenging. I love a challenge as well. So like something that really challenges your train of thought or challenges the way you have to really think innovatively to
Think
to solve a problem.
yeah, and I think the bit you touched on that you've been looking at and you see as a big trend, we see this in business as well, is
Hmm.
that personal customer experience. And I think,
Hmm.
I was chatting with somebody just yesterday, and pretty much their whole career has been around the rollout of products for banks and the customer experience of how does the customer experience it, but then how does the internal team within the bank
Hmm.
deliver that experience? What are the problems that they have as well? And so I think sometimes people just see customer experience as the end customer, but it's all of the
Hmm.
people in that supply chain. So I think it's a very hot topic, and it's something which, again, I find this sort of stuff fascinating. And we're getting towards the end of our chat today, but I could talk to you for hours, because I think the reason I was keen to get you on is the amount of tie-ups between sport and business.
Hmm.
Sometimes people think sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's less obvious, but hitting the nail on the head there, the user customer experience, using those data points,
Hmm.
the types of professionals that you have to hire for the things behind the scenes. So we're not talking about the athletes,
Hmm.
but we're talking about the people that support those athletes. You need that good commercial individual that's going to help get you those new partnerships and those new deals. All of these aspects, there's a hell of a lot of crossover, and it's going to be very interesting to see where it all goes, I must say. um, so from your side, if we were to kind of, take away a couple of sort of wrap up statements for today, this could either be things that you've said today, so a bit of a summary, or maybe something you've not said, but it's a really good thing to mention as kind of almost a sort of a closing statement. If you were to have two or three statements, one around, you know, lessons I'd tell a younger me. Uh, whether you'd listen or not is another thing, but things I'd tell a younger me. The things you tell people that are going through a transition, and I mean that might be within sport at the end of their career, that might be within the business world. They're transitioning from one job family to another, the company, whatever it might be. There might be even country. You've done that as well. So just transition sort of piece of advice? And then finally, those might be it. But if there's a final third thing which open to you as a sort of a closing statement, by all means. But a younger you, a sort of transition sort of thought, and if there's anything else to kind of finish off with, I think there'd be three great things to kind of leave as a great soundbite. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a younger me, I guess for the most part, just having, I think I could have been more disciplined. I think in
Mm,
all aspects of of life in general, whether that be training, whether that just be studying a bit more, and probably partying less. But obviously, it's part and parcel of being young as well. You have to go through those growing pains and those experiences that really shape you for the future. Um, I think, yeah, for the most part, I think I would have, uh, I guess, been hungry for more information to what really affected my career as a professional athlete. Just
mm-hmm.
learning more on obviously the mental health side or the strength and conditioning side, um, or training or learning about teammates and whatnot. So I think that would have been something that I would really have loved to obviously tell my younger self.
Yep.
Um, from a transition standpoint, and I've always said this to a lot of my players that I coach, is do the work now, um, invest now in your future.
Yeah.
You have a lot of time to do it. And I think also being able to not see yourself in, I guess, where you're currently at, but kind of envisioning yourself in the next like 3 or 4 years and what you want to achieve. And obviously putting in the structure that you need to obviously get you there. Um, I think being proactive is such a good tool, especially for athletes that are thinking about transitioning or have set a date for, finishing from professional sport.
Yeah.
Um, I think, yeah, doing that would really help, soften the blow of the realities of finishing a professional sporting career. And then I think once you realize that, I think the key to a lot of transitioning is understanding from a very young age or early on in your career that this career is not forever. And I
Yeah.
think the athletes that get that, I think usually do very well in the transition phase.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to like tell athletes that they can't do it because obviously they're athletes. Like they have to have that kind of ego as well that
Yeah.
drives them, to succeed. So um, I guess just being very realistic with yourself. Um, there's a fine line between being very realistic and then um, being very egotistical in terms of, still, I guess, mm, trying to deny that, the transition phase has arrived. Um, and, sometimes it's better to kind of take, um, the opportunities when they come,
Mm,
especially when the time's right to retire. But yeah, some people um, kind of struggle with that, but I think that is a fine line. So that's pretty much the things that I would say
yeah.
to a lot of his athletes that are going through the transition phase or aspiring athletes to keep in mind.
Mm. No, I think look, they're great things to finish on, and I think again a lot of those um, lessons are, it is the planning, it is the looking ahead, it is investing in yourself. I think all of these things people can take away from that, and again, I love to see it across, various disciplines, sports,
Mhm,
different businesses. You need to be doing these things, and you need to be
mhm,
investing in yourself. And I mean that's the biggest thing. And I think that's, kudos to yourself. That investment in yourself has been really key. And I think, that's why the next chapter of your life's a very interesting one, and it will only, and it's continuing to help you flourish in what you're doing now. So Look, from my side, thanks so much today. I've really enjoyed it. I think we've covered some really great things. I hope people can take away some great lessons from this as well. And yeah, if anyone's got any other questions and things, obviously they can reach out to you directly as well and so on through LinkedIn and things. But yeah, look, from my side, thanks so much today to the audience. Please do like, subscribe, and share as always. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one. And Andrew, thanks so much for your time today, and have a great one. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
It's been a pleasure, Oliver. Thank you.
Thanks.